Good afternoon. Don Huffmeister here again. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about building technique in elementary bands. And I'd say we should build from the student's strength. Now it'd be logical to ask the question, well, what are the student's strengths in an elementary band? Well, as you know from the recruitment process, the students that came in and wanted to play, if you were to have asked them many questions about music, like if you had put a quarter note up on the board, more than likely they would not have been able to tell you what grade they learned that symbol in, if in fact all of them even knew the symbol. But if you ask them what 1 plus 1 is, they'll know when they learned it and what grade they learned in it. So we can safely assume that many of the kids that you're teaching really don't have many musical strengths to work from. What they do have, though, is they have curiosity and they have the desire to play. And part of that is based on the fact that this is probably one of the first times in the school that they've been allowed to choose what they want to do. So we can build from that strength and actually get some very fine musicians. The students are likely to pick up the things that you're talking to them about, like how to assemble the instrument and how to make the first sounds on it and all that sort of thing. Those are the strengths that you're giving directly to them with some action part on their part by practice. But eventually, of course, we know we need to go beyond that. And so what you do is you take those first sounds that you taught them, maybe G, F, E, D, and C, say in the clarinet, and now you're to the point where you're going to present them on paper so that they can identify the pitch with paper. And we want that to be as simple as it possibly can. Just the note and the fingering. And later on, probably just the notes so we can see whether they've got the fingering. If you'll remember, in one of the early videos I told about the first lessons that I had on trumpet. There weren't very many of them, just 2 or 3 from my Uncle Frank. He was a road musician, and after the Lenten season was over or something, for whatever reason, he had a few weeks off. He went back to playing, and I was left on my own. And I looked at that first book. You recall I showed it to you, what happened on the first page. And we see that the lessons are 1 line apiece, and they go from very low notes to very high notes, and they get very complicated in terms of rhythm patterns and so on. So by the end of the first page, you've had 5 lessons. And on the next page, of course, you're going to be triple tonguing. Well, that didn't work, and Frank wrote some things out, which I've told you about. Since he was gone, I had a paper route. I got paid about $3 a week for it to deliver 400 shoppers or something. All you had to do is get the papers in the vicinity of the front door, and you got paid for it. I earned enough money to go to a music store and get a book. So I went and I looked, and I found this book, the St. Jacome's book, Master Method for Trumpet. And you could get part 1 for $3.50, part 2 for $4, or you could get the whole thing for $6.50. I must have had that much money, so that's what I bought. And being a grade school student and having studied, how to read the Dick and Jane series and go through mathematic books, you go through them from page 1 through the end of the book. If there are 100 pages, well, you take them one at a time. I didn't know that master method would be very difficult to go through page by page, and anybody who's looked at one knows it. But let's take a look at the first page in the St. Jacome Master Method, which was written in the late 1800s. And you can see that really moves you along. You're going to have to do some tall practicing to get that down. And that's just the first lesson. Here's the end of the first lesson. You can see that top thing. Now, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that a young grade school student is only going to bloody their nose on something like that. So what we really need to do is we need to break things down so they're very, very simple and the students can grab onto those things, and we can gradually go from what they know to what they don't know. What they know then that we've taught them is a strength. So we take them from a strength into a weakness. And that's what the supplementary book and books do. They allow you, the teacher, to be able to take them from very simple things and move them to more complex things. So on that basic sound chart, all of the sounds are just notated with a note head. There's no rhythm pattern there. There's no indication of how many of them you ought to play. There's nothing to tell you what the dynamic level would be or anything like that. They're just note heads. You just play the sound for fairly long. When we get to the scales, we see the same thing. We see 4 note heads going up, the first tetrachord and so on till we got the semblance of that E flat tonality, again done with just note heads. There's no slurs in there. We don't know how fast you're going to play them. We don't know how loud you're going to play them or anything else. And actually, when we get to the basic part of the book, where we have the little exercises that I've said could be sung, they could be played, they could be buzzed, they could be hummed, you name it. There are all kinds of different ways that these simple exercises could be played. There are no time signatures in them. There are no key signatures in them. And no indication, again, of how long those notes ought to be played or how fast. So you can see, you as a teacher, knowing where the students are, you can begin to build those things back in as you see fit because you know where they are. And I think that's a real asset in a supplementary book. You may wish to build endurance with them. Great, you can do it. You might wish to build tone quality in them by playing long notes. You can do it. You might want to build a technique so that it has more speed in connection with it. All you got to do is change the tempo of that, and you can do it. You can make a trill out of number 1 if you want to. So, at any rate, that's how I think this elementary book is different from other books, and we'll talk more about that some other time. Good. I think this is long enough, and it's been a pleasure talking with you, and I hope I've given you some ideas that will be useful. Thanks, Don Huffmeister.